Talk about your comment about geometry is everything off-road. I presume by that you mean approach, departure, and ramp angles?
Yep, that's right. And ground clearance.
Yeah, oh, in ground clearance. Yeah, I was definitely going to add ground clearance on that. So you said the Rivian's really good on that score. Can you elaborate on that? And also, I looked underneath it and it seemed like it was really clean as well, so it could kind of slide.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always, when I write off-road reviews, I always make it very clear to readers that geometry is the most important factor in an off-road vehicle. You can talk all day about good traction control systems and tires and articulation and all that other stuff. You can add skid plates and whatever you want to do. But if you don't have a high approach angle, departure angle, breakover angle, and ground clearance, you're just not even going to be able to use any of those other features.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And, I would say this becomes the most apparent in the pickup truck segment, where, having to package that bed compromises breakover angle and departure angle. And I make reference in my story to the Jeep Gladiator, it's built on the Wrangler, which is, has great geometry, but it adds a 5-foot pickup truck bed to it. And the result is you have a smaller departure angle and a ridiculously pathetic breakover angle. And so there's a video in my story that shows a Gladiator trying to traverse the Rubicon Trail, and it's just banging its belly everywhere, and it's in its rear bumper. Yes, it's got locking differentials, it's got low range and crazy gearing, and it's got skid plates and all that, but it can't get, it's held up by geometry. The Rivian, of course, has some advantages on that front, some significant advantages to anything in the class. Having a 4.5-foot bed obviously is kind of it's a huge help, and it's a compromise. But the air suspension is kind of the biggest enabler. The thing is, you couldn't have its highest ride height setting as a fixed ride height setting. Like the Rivian R1T with its 14.5 inches of ground clearance, if that were the only ride height setting, it would be a terrible vehicle on road. It would be so compromised in range, it would just be unusable almost. So the air suspension enables you to have ridiculous air suspension, and also the tight packaging, which is enabled by not just the shorter bed, but of course the fact that it's an EV and there are just not as many, yes, you've got 4 motors, but you don't have all this driveline you have to worry about, a big engine, exhaust, all that stuff.
Yeah, look, oh God, there's a lot to talk about there. I totally agree about the geometry and the Wrangler. Yeah, I was on the JL press launch over here a couple of years back, and the Wrangler's always been poor on that. I do have one tip though for driving a Wrangler to improve, or not really improve, the ramp over angle, and that is not to disconnect the front sway bar, because the more flex you have, the lower your chassis gets to the ground. And I've had Wranglers in situations where they have not made it up a hill with the sway bar out because the diff dragged. You put the sway bar back in and it makes it up the hill.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, think about it. I've had this argument. I've had this argument on Facebook. The more a vehicle flexes, the lower the chassis comes to the ground. Right? So this is heretical, right?
Yeah, but it's heretical. It is.
No, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. Everyone's going to hate it, but maximum flex is not necessarily a good thing off-road. There you go. I've said it, right?
In some conditions, honestly.
In some conditions.
Totally. Yeah. Like there are certain scenarios where, I could see you disconnect the sway bar and then boom, your diff goes right in the dirt. Like I could absolutely see that. But having the ability to toggle that is key. You want as many.
Look, absolutely. And there's some cases where you definitely want maximum flex for all 4 wheels on the ground. So the sway bar disconnect is great. But in some situations off-road, you're better off keeping that sway bar in. And the thing is, with locking diffs and IWD and brake traction control, having a wheel in the air is no longer the tragedy it once was. Because when we were running open diffs, open diffs, one wheel in the air, it was game over. It was momentum or track build or whatever else. Now, it's not ideal, but it's not necessarily going to stop you. So
not necessarily. For the record, I am a big articulation fan. I just want to make that clear. Robert, you're on your own on that front, but I do grant you that in certain conditions, yeah, it can be
You know,
detrimental.
every American I've talked to is a big articulation fan, so live axle fan. So this is not surprising. I am not representative of Australia because I am pro EVs. I'm pro independent front and rear suspension. I'm generally a heretic, but still some people follow me, maybe just to see what other crazy stuff I'm going to say next.
Yeah, what crazy stuff you come up with.
Yeah, exactly. Now, a couple of other points there. The Rivian, to my mind, there's three types of EVs. One is your resto mod, where you take an old Range Rover or something, you put batteries in it, and then it's an EV. Then you've got your ICE conversion, where you've got an ICE vehicle and the OEM manufacturer says, okay, we're going to put batteries in it. And then you've got your pure ground up EV design. It's the latter which I think are the best because they're just not compromised. The chassis is designed to take a battery, it's just, and you've got a frunk. Now, for those of you in Australia, what is a frunk? Well, okay, in America, they call the boot the trunk. All right, so that's the first thing. What's that?
Frunk is not a term known by most Australians?
No.
Okay,
No.
Australians, prepare to be enlightened. This is going to change your life here.
Well, look, I mean, you call it a trunk, we call it the boot, right? You call it a hood, we call it the bonnet.
Yes, of course.
Right? So there's different terms there, and I'm not just talking metric versus imperial. But anyway, a frunk is a front trunk. So you can open up the front of the car and you've got storage space, lots of storage space. If you want to look at a lot of storage space, take a look at the Atlas video where Mark Hanchett, and I've interviewed him as well, opens it up and it's just like this. It could fit like 3 or 4 bodies in there, just huge amounts of space. So the question is, from a practicality point of view, I really like the idea of a frunk and that also compartment they've got behind the rear seat. So talk to us about, from a storage point of view, how the Rivian you looked at it from sort of storage and practicality.
Yeah, it's great. Big frunk, lots of interior volume in that crew cab. There's room behind the rear seats in this pass through, the gear tunnel, as they call it. There's room underneath the rear bed floor. There's a bin mostly filled with a spare tire. They make good use of the space available, and there's plenty, even with the 4-motor 4-wheel drive system. It's a compact chassis design. So plenty of room for stuff in a small footprint, which is great. And that's the story with EVs in general. This is one thing we can all look forward to.
Now, what about the weight? Because how much heavier is it compared to a comparable ICE vehicle?
So I initially said in the story that it weighs approximately 6,000 pounds. Rivian emailed me to tell me, well, actually it weighs approximately 7,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
That's a lot. That is over a ton more than other vehicles, roughly a ton more than other vehicles in that class, which is substantial. You're never going to hear me say that doesn't matter because the weight is down low.
Mm-hmm.
The weight is down low and it does handle well, but a ton is a ton. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. In terms of, to me, I look at it. What could this thing be with a if you didn't have this ridiculous curb weight? And this is just kind of where we're at right now with battery technology, and we should all be excited about if this is where we are with a lead weight on board, where we're going to be when we don't have this kind of this hindrance. It's also like the big part, the big thing is like the energy needed to move that weight is hurting our range. So it's a big deal. 7,000 pounds each.
Yeah, so 7,000 pounds is about 3.2 tons. So that's compared to a Toyota 300 series, that weighs in about 2,400, and a Ranger, which is a little bit smaller, to be fair, than the Rivian, is about sort of 2,300. So you're talking a good 800-900 kilograms more. But, as David said, that weight is two things. It's down low and it's central. which is really important from a handling perspective. And also, I noticed the Rivian has got air suspension. And, again, coming from a Land Rover background, air suspension is just the best. It's just incredible what it can do for a car's capabilities. You don't have to compromise it so much.
I thought you were going somewhere completely different there when you said coming from a Land Rover perspective. Because my friends here, everyone who had air suspension on their Land Rover has replaced it with coils at one point.
Really? Why? It was the best.
It just fails after a while,
Look, it does.
But
Now,
honestly, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, now with Land Rover, they have a cross-linking system. So when one wheel goes up in low range, it will actually force the other wheel down to mimic a live axle. Does Rivian have that?
Great. You know what? I'm not entirely sure, but I can tell you that they have this sway bar system that would do essentially.
I saw that in your review. Talk to us about this sway bar system. Yeah.
You know what? That is an area where I'm not well versed enough to speak with any sort of authority. But the way I understand is that fluid in the dampers on each side of the car is connected via piping that has a valve in it, and through the valving, you can adjust body roll. So if it's wide open, the fluid can move freely.
Yeah. Okay.
If you close it, you basically end up with a situation where you're trying to compress a liquid, which won't happen. So that's how I understand it works, kind of on a rudimentary, kind of basic level.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's similar to KDSS on the 200 series Land Cruiser, and Nissan had HBMC, hydraulic body motion control. So it sounds like it's similar to that. Okay, got it. So the advantage for other people is that allows you to have very flexible suspension off road, yet on road really to stiffen it up. And because the vehicle's got so much mass, that's really important. If I go to my Lotus Elise, for example, people go, "Oh, that's a sports car. It must ride really roughly." Well, it doesn't. It's actually got quite a soft suspension, but because it only weighs under 900 kilograms, which I think is 500 pounds or something like that. It doesn't have a lot of body roll around corners, even with soft suspension, because it's so light. And Mazda have done the same sort of thing with the MX-5 or the Miata, as it's known in North America.
Yeah, the weight transfer is not significant on those cars. I drove an Elise recently for the first time. What a vehicle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love it. Yeah. Now, what do you see as the future of EVs and car propulsion? We talked before about the weight penalty. Hydrogen, for example, would solve that. Someone just drove 1,300 kilometers, or was it 1,300 miles? Anyway, an insanely long distance from 5 kilograms of hydrogen, which you couldn't even do with diesel. What do you see the future with car propulsion in cars?
Well, I think there are certain, like the idea that our entire fleet will be EV at any point, even in, well, maybe in my lifetime. I don't know. To be honest, there are certain areas where I can't even see EVs being feasible right now. And that is particularly high load scenarios, towing, over the road trucks. I think, if you're someone who tows a lot, and like in the Rivian, I really believe if you were towing 11,000 pounds, there are pretty normal conditions, going up a hill or whatever, a mountain, where you could probably only end up with double-digit range. So, less than 100 miles, less than 160 kilometers. That's just not a scenario where EVs are ready yet.
Yeah, so you're saying that they're not suited for towing. I tend to agree. I did a tow test a few years ago with a Tesla X, towing a 1,000 kilogram trailer, and its range was about half. And that was a light trailer. And I wasn't driving it super fast. Yeah. That made a massive difference.
Yeah. I mean, those kinds of scenarios right now are just, EVs are just not ready for those kinds of scenarios. You have to keep the vehicle demand energy down. They got to be slippery profiles, as small as possible. And even then you need a big battery. Infrastructure problems are still there. What's it like in Australia, infrastructure wise?
Getting better. We are really behind the world in terms of EVs. We have less than 1% of our market, which is EVs. In Norway, it's 75%. So we're about the worst in the world because our government doesn't believe EVs need to exist, and they're really pro carbon fuels. So we're really bad there. But today I have a 2.3 ton caravan which I'm sitting in now. It's my mobile office, and I've towed that for about 5 hours today. And I believe it's going to be a long time before any EV could do that without refueling. And I didn't refuel it today because I actually towed it another 2 hours 3 days ago, and that's when I filled up the tank. So I've done about 7 hours worth of towing with this thing at the speed limit up and down hills, without refueling. And an EV will not be doing that anytime soon, and it will need to for me to replace my ICE vehicle with it.
Even large like cargo vans, today if you need a big cargo van that the thing about a squared off cargo van that has maybe a squared off profile with lots of drag, you can adjust for poor efficiency by just adding a bigger fuel tank. It's a blow molded plastic tank that's an additional like what, $50 maybe to add another 10-15 gallons of capacity. The equivalent in an EV to just increasing your gas tank size is like probably thousands of dollars. It's just increasing the gas tank size is no longer just blow molding a tank bigger. It's adding so much cost and weight. So yeah, for those vehicles with a high vehicle demand, energy, in other words, energy to move it down the road, it's going to be tricky.
Yeah, and look, the other problem is when you use petrol or diesel, your vehicle gets lighter. But when you use battery power, it doesn't get lighter, which is the problem. And the other issue is payload, because if a vehicle can only have a maximum weight of so much, and you've used a lot of that in its tare weight, you've got little payload left. And that's a problem generally with vehicle four-wheel drives at the moment in Australia, because we like to overload the hell out of them. And EVs are going to be more of a problem. So I see electric four-wheel drives initially going into the day trip market and around town and so forth. I don't see them towing interstate and replacing ICE vehicles for a while yet. But I think we'll get there eventually. I mean, if Atlas are to be believed, with 15-minute recharges for 700-mile range or something like that, then yeah, that would be fine. But I don't think we're quite ready for production with that sort of technology yet.
Yeah, we need to focus on getting people who commute into EVs. I mean, for the longest time, I was like, I want to commute in my old truck. And then I realized, what? Commutes suck. Generally, commutes suck. Yeah. Like even in your lease, if you're on the freeway and it's bumper to bumper, it sucks. Just drive an EV. I mean, there's not a huge advantage to the lease and a commute. So that, I think our first step needs to be get commuters into EVs.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so coming back to the Rivian then, who do you see would buy a Rivian as opposed to an enthusiast who just wants an EV or just wants a Rivian? What sort of practical, what sort of person do you have in mind to say, yeah, the answer to your question is going to be buy a Rivian?
Honestly, to me, what they did great is they made this truck an enthusiast vehicle, something that looks cool, has all these gadgets. The gadgets are key. A lot of them are kind of like, do I need them? But they're so charming. I have to say, like, as I start using these gadgets, like you can pull out a stove and cook your food on it. And it's just a bunch of stuff like that after a while, and the interior quality is so good. After a while, you're just like, this is so cool. I think the cool factor is going to draw a lot of people in. Here's the thing. People don't buy cars always for practical reasons. Oftentimes, it's such an irrational purchase. I know so many people who have bought cars that make no sense for them, but they just thought that thing is cool.
Yeah. The
Rivian is going to have no issue pulling in people who are just looking for something cool.
Okay.
I think the best, people who want it to be practical for them are people who own homes or live in homes, not apartments, have homes where they can charge it every day, use it around town, commute around town, occasionally tow a boat, 30 miles or 50 miles to their nearest lake. Just someone like I could just see like in Texas, someone living in a ranch in Houston, for example, that could be their daily driver. unless they go to like other cities in Texas frequently, in which case it might be a little tricky. But yeah, I think people who currently drive like F-150s as a daily driver around town, I think they'd be interested in the Rivian. What's going to be tricky is, how is it in Australia? Well, I know how it is in Australia. You have intense brand loyalty there, don't you?
Not really. You see, the UK is a Land Rover country, right? You say anything wrong about Land Rover there, and you will be. They'll throw a Wellington boot at you, right? I'm British as well as Australian, right? The US, I haven't spent a lot of time in the US. It's been on my list for a while. Hopefully now COVID's over, I can get over there next year. You guys are a Jeep country. Australia, we have everything. So there's a lot of Toyota loyalists there, and they're Toyota loyalists because they'll tell you. We have a Jeep. The Jeep cult people, they're certainly here. They give their Jeeps birthdays. They've got Jeep tattoos. That's how you recognize those guys. We've got a lot of Land Rover fans over here. So pick whatever you want, and there'll be sort of intense following for the four-wheel drive here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brand loyalty in the truck market in the US. You're a Ford person, you drive Fords, But I think and there's also this notion that like trucks are supposed to have certain powertrains. It's a pickup truck, it needs to have a V8 or a diesel or whatever. Here's the thing. I think the Rivian, in addition to being compelling for people who daily drive like F-150s, I think people who drive SUVs will also look at the Rivian as well. There's a big cabin. You can fit your 2.5 kids in the back. There's plenty of storage space. I think people who buy Range Rovers, for example, might go to the Rivian. It really is an upscale.
Actually, that's true. Yeah, because we should mention that the Rivian is coming out in wagon as well as pickup/ute version. Yeah,
right. Yeah, or as we would say, SUV as well as pickup. Yeah,
yeah. We use the term SUV as well, but sometimes some people go to say, if they call their four-wheel drive, someone calls their four-wheel drive an SUV. That's not an SUV. That's a four-wheel drive. Yeah, and
I like that.
Yeah, there's a difference. You can really push their buttons in that way. Try it with a Land Cruiser and say, that's a nice SUV you've got there, and then see what happens. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
yeah. If you come over to Australia, I'll give you all the buttons to push. Don't worry about that. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Look, the US. If you need any Jeeps to drive off-road, I've got a fleet of them. So just let me know.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll probably need a bodyguard of some of this heretic things I'm going to say as well. So
that's true. That is true. You said some stuff today already.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, probably time to wrap it up now. Is there anything else which you want to make an observation about the Rivian generally, your impressions driving of it, the futures, anything else?
No, I think, I will say main takeaway, there are, I have to say there were some early production quality issues, things like seam welds or just seam joints and just some other build quality things. But overall, like, you have to realize this is the very first vehicle from this brand new company.
Yeah.
And they did such an excellent job. It is such an awesome vehicle to drive.
Yeah, well, look, not only is it the first vehicle from the company's ever produced, it's also the first of its type, right? And your comments about IWD, again, I'm going to come back to the fact that 24 years ago, when brake traction control is coming on the market, it's nothing like as good as is at the moment. And IWD is going to improve very, very rapidly. So I think we've just got, and not just IWD, but the whole electronic and electric drivetrain. It's the first one, guys. Give it a chance. And it's already this good. It's only going to get better. Like I say, I mean, differentials, there is no more development to be done. We're done with that, right? Lockers are lockers. So this is just the beginning. It's really exciting.
Yeah, Robert, dude, this was great, man. I had a great time hanging out with you here.
Thank you, David, very much indeed for a really, really interesting chat. I really appreciate you making the time for us. And I wish you all the best of your journalism career, driving and everything else.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Had a great time.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening, day, night, wherever you are at the moment. Cheers. Bye.